John Broons, great to see you today. How are you?
Very good, Doug. How are you?
Fine. We've known each other for several years through this virtual study group, and we've never shaken hands. Though you're in Australia, I'm in the US. And I'm curious if you could just describe yourself a little bit, some of your career highlights. I know you to be wise, generous, thoughtful. What else?
Oh, you've summed me up completely. It's one of those things to be considered wise. It's not something that I would consider myself. So to hear it from somebody, it's a nice thing to hear. I grew up in a family business. It was a listed public company. It was a big thing, and it doesn't exist today. Parts of it are in other enterprises. So, something my granddad started, my father and uncle kept it going. They took an offer and went in their own directions. I ended up working in my dad's business, and when he passed, my mother owned it. Being the youngest of four and having an older sister who became managing director, and worked with her and ended up buying the business out of the family. So I got myself a life, which was fine. So that sort of headed me in the family business stuff. The buying the business out and the family structure was something that there were no advisors around back then. There was no one that would talk to you. You could talk to an accountant about the best way to actually acquire something and pay for it. A lawyer might give you advice on whether or not you put it in a company or whether you put it into a trust. But there was no one that said, this is how you deal with your family. And that stuck with me and carried with me for a very long time, to the point where I spent a lot of time learning about it and talking to other families that were in business, high net worth, ultra high net worth families, and formed a lot of my conclusions, did some study, learned, connected with different people, and have had a pretty good journey over 40, 50 years, just talking about families in business.
Some of whom might be in the portrait behind you. Is that true? Is that your dad?
Actually, the portrait is a new addition. That was something that finally made it to me. That's a portrait of my mother in her, I'm guessing, 30s.
Ah.
And the other picture is of my grandfather, and that was done in the 1950s, I believe, by a famous artist, Australian artist, and it's a watercolour. So, yeah, I like to have the family around.
Some people are haunted by indistinct memories, but now we've got visual memories of some of your legacy. I love it.
Yeah, I like to have things around me that remind me of some of the successes that I've had that I haven't even deemed to be successes. It's other people's perceptions. I just want to make the best I can of every day and do it for me and do it for my family and do it for those around me, those that I end up spending time with. That's how come I think you and I seem to end up talking together.
We've had some lively conversations. Okay, so some people think that in our youngest years, John before age 20, something formative might have happened that defined your character, defined your career, defined whatever you chose to embrace later on. It could be a mentor. It could be a windfall or calamity or tragedy. It could be anything. Is that true for you? Did something formative happen in your youngest years?
I never fit they couldn't fit me into the school system. I did not like study. Not that I couldn't study, I just didn't like what they wanted me to do. And I couldn't sit down to write an essay. So, the easiest thing was, okay, forget school, go to work. And by the time I was 20, I'd spent a year working in the States. I lived up in Oregon and Washington State, worked with a family business. You pronounce it over there, Weyerhaeuser. So I worked with them for a year, and I'm going back 50 years ago, probably 51 years ago. Spent a year up in their head office and down in different sawmills. Spent some time with McMillan Bledel and a few other timber industry companies. So, yeah, I had the opportunity to see the world. That was pretty eye-opening. Living by myself and making a go of living by myself overseas. The long hand of my parents was still there if I tried something. There was one day I was threatened with, we'll grab you and bring you home. Do not pass go, do not collect 200. It's sort of like I went and did some flying of a light aircraft thinking that I wanted to become a pilot. And I still have no idea how my parents found out I was doing that. But that's what kids do, isn't it? They push the boundaries.
And I'm told that you're in a country of Australia with entrepreneurs and innovators who tend to break rules constitutionally. Is that is that true
I
for
don't know
your
about
career when you
constitutionally.
reflect?
Australia, yeah, it's changed a lot in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Growing up was really easy and fun, but the economic environment here is being a little bit more challenging of late. Yeah, politics gets in the way of things, and we are a great size of a country, but we have 25 million people, mostly on the East Coast. If you draw a line between Perth on the West Coast at the bottom end of Australia and Brisbane, which is sort of like halfway up the East Coast, you just draw a line across the country. 97% of the country lives on the bottom half, and most of that is on that bottom East Coast and bottom corner. So when you think about 25 million in the size of the United States or larger, there's a lot of empty space.
Yeah, that's true here too. You're in the bottom left corner, I think. Perth is
Yeah,
how many
Perth.
people?
Perth, it's a great city. We're apparently one of the most secluded cities in the world. We are surrounded three sides by ocean and water and one
Ah.
side by a huge desert. So you really got to want to come here.
And you want to stay there. You've built a number of great programs. You're known as a Vistage chair, and is it called Family Business Australia? What's it
Yeah,
called?
Family Business Australia is an entity that it's a not-for-profit, and it helps families who are in business
Hmm.
with advocacy, and they have these forum groups that bring family members in, or a family member from a family into a group. And the idea is to talk about the issues and take some learnings back to the family so that the family will actually get some new knowledge in about the dynamics that are at play.
And your role is facilitator, leader,
I,
what?
oh,
Guru,
so
mentor?
I've had many roles there. I've been on the board. I was one of the founders. I've run a couple of their forum groups. I've facilitated their succession course for a number of years nationally. I've had some time coordinating the advisors together in Perth in Western Australia, but I'm sort of slowly stepping back from that. So I've transitioned the forum group, transitioned the succession course to another person, and I've transitioned the facilitating of family business advisors for the organisation to somebody else. So now I'm just an advisor member.
Just.
And yeah, and I stay connected. I go to different events. We do have professional development points that we do keep for these advisors. So, I turn up to the AM meetings once a month. I don't make them all because I don't really like getting up early in the morning. For me right now, it's 10:15 in the evening. So I'm really happy to stay up till 1 and 2 in the morning talking to people overseas. But to try and get me out of bed, hard yards.
It's striking to me that you've been so active as a direct facilitator in one-to-ones or one to small groups or one to large audiences. But now you've evolved a little bit and you've written some stuff down and you've actually published your first book at age whatever. Tell us about that process for you.
Yeah, writing a book is one of those things that, well, you heard how much I hated study as a young kid and how much I hated writing down things. Computers make things a lot easier. You can actually talk to a computer and it writes it down for you. But that still takes some skill, and then you've got to edit it. But I finally just one day said, yes, I'll do it. And then it's, well, what am I going to write about? I think my wife was terrified that I was going to write the John Broons story. But in reality, I've been working with somebody a few years ago, and it worked out that I actually have my own process when I work with families. And that's broken down into three parts. And that's what the book talks about, those three parts. And there's a little bit of homework to do in there. And, there's space in there there's questions asked and there's space to write down your answers and talk about them with your family. So whether you're just on starting the journey working with your family or whether you're talking about transitioning generations, there's some questions to ask. It's not necessarily the book that you're going to buy if you're a second, third, fourth generation in a very wealthy family where the business doesn't exist anymore. We're just working out of a family office and we're looking at investments all the time. That's a different thing to having an entity that is operating and you're involved in it. So this is about the beginning part of growing your business and having a decision that, oh yeah, one day I might just transition this to another person in my family. Or somebody says, hey, dad, or hey, mum, I want a piece of this. And then how do we do it?
And the title?
Creating a thriving family business with a subtitle, Progress, Not Perfection. A lot of people think, oh, I'll get rid of it when it's right, when I've got it just where I want it to be. But my experience has seen that, that is such a glimmer of light. You'll never actually get there. If you do, it's gone in that flash.
What I love about that subtitle in particular is that it's a broader audience. There are more people who wonder, what can I provide for my kids or grandkids or that fifth generation? In other words, 5 generations from now, what might they think of me or want to think of being a family member? And one of the things you've always impressed me with are your questions. You just mentioned the back of the book has a number of key questions. And I suspect that you've used questions throughout your career, not only because you're a curious person, but because you wanted to learn something about others, about your clients. So I'm curious, are there kinds of questions or certain questions that you tend to favor, that you tend to ask clients more often than not?
I feel like asking a question just as a funny retort. Yeah, why do you really want me to ask that?
Because
Um,
I know it's how your brain clicks.
look, there's always the question when you start talking with families, you find all sorts of individuals that are on the journey, that want to be on the journey, that want to stay as individuals and don't want to be a part of the journey. So the only way to find out who they are is to ask questions. So you've got to be interested and you've got to listen. So it's that question part, but the other part is the listening. So if you're asking a question of, okay, how much is enough to the parent? How much is enough? Is there something that they've ever considered? Is there enough? Do they need an extra 100 million in their back pocket for that rainy day? Or is 10 million enough to keep them going for the rest of their lives? So what do they plan on doing? What ages are they? Um, so they're the kind of that deep thing, that how much is enough is really an interesting one. But what do you love doing? Because each person is different, you're going to come at the questions differently. Sometimes you're asking about their education. Where did you go to school? How much did you learn? Did you like school? Did you hate school? Why? What was it? Was it a teacher? You asked me a little bit earlier about my mentors. There are so many people that I've seen, but I miss my dad. I would have loved to have been able to talk to him about business, and I never had the chance. I was 27 when he passed, and I was way too young, way too immature. Not young. I was 27. A lot of people have life experiences that hard knocks. By then, I was very lucky. So questions, it comes down to industry as well. It comes down to geography. I mean, I'm working with a couple at the moment overseas, and they're just getting their business rolling. They've had opportunities and they're trying to sort themselves out, and that's fantastic. But the geography, I'm working with them on Zoom. So I don't have them face to face. In fact, I've never had, same as you, I've never actually been in the same room as them, but I've had one-to-ones with each of them individually. I've had conversations with people in America. I've had conversations with people in the UK, and the conversations, so long as I can actually communicate in the same language and the culture is similar, then, it comes back to, when I ask a question, it comes from something they've generally said, which leads me to think about, okay, so what's the next question that's aligned with that, or come at it from left of field? And the individual could be receptive to the questions or can just build a brick wall, and then you've got to work through what it is. Is it a lack of trust with the relationship, or them or me, or where is it? And, you learn those things when you talk to different individuals in the family. So you build a picture in your head. Something I have to be very aware of anytime I work with families is how much bias of my own background comes out, is there, and how much I should have no biases when I'm working with a family. So I've got to be careful the questions I ask.
Boy, how do you manage that?
I don't know whether you've had the experience, but I've certainly had the situation where I've got me sitting here on this shoulder. I've got me sitting up in the back corner of the room, and I've got me sitting up over the front of the room over there, and I'm checking in to see what it looks like. So I'm trying to keep aware as much as I can as an individual, what's going on in the room.
I love that. Authors call it a floating point of view. And the idea is to make sure that I'm not too biased or tied into my own thoughts, feelings, agenda, history, whatever, but responding directly to others' energy and needs and such. So that makes me curious if there's a question you kind of ask yourself. I've shared with you that I have one. Why am I speaking now? Which is a question I ask myself. Do you have a question like that you ask yourself to help your self-awareness and to facilitate that process?
I think a lot of the time I let the conversations flow. And the thinking that I do is probably more after the meetings. And it's sitting there with that conversation or with that last half an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, um, and just sitting, because that then I'm really digesting the conversation as not just one sliver, not just one little piece, but I'm trying to put it in a 3D environment, because families work in 3D. That's where my questions get built. So, it's really important to ask individuals what do they want as individuals. And until they've got security for themselves, it's really hard to get them to separate out.
We talked about your career generally, and I'm curious, when you think about the decades of conversations you've had, you've now embraced Zoom. We all have used different newer technologies. Have you noticed any trends in the past, maybe based on technologies or types of questions or maybe complexities of families? I love the 3D imagery. Are you seeing a different picture?
No, what I'm seeing, there's a fundamental change that I have noticed, and I don't know when it happened, but it's all based around the computers and the advent of computing and accessibility. And it's this, there used to be more respect, if I use the word respect, for people that were older, because they knew a lot and they could tell stories. If they couldn't tell you an exact application or a reason for doing something, they could tell you a story, and we respected stories. Now everything is so available, and there is so much that is untrue, documented,
Hmm.
and algorithms are driving us to go in different directions for commercial gain, that it's a very different world to what it was 20, 30,
Right.
40 years ago.
Hmm.
And that makes people very different. And if we don't respect each other, especially in a family, how are you going to have good communication? Because the biggest change I see is that unless the values and the culture of the family is strong, really strong, and you're able to have a conversation, or actually have a conversation about conversations, and say, listen, we're never going to let anything break this family apart. Even if we disagree, at the end of the day, we'll go home, we'll shut the door, come back tomorrow, and everything will be as new. Yes, we don't have to agree on everything, but we have to respect each other, and we have to be able to deal with each other and draw a line.
That's a tremendous point, because it makes me think beyond the biological origins of the family, like your siblings and my siblings, to the family we create, or allies we develop, or the colleagues we choose to associate with. In other words, our adult family could be quite different than our biological family. Is that just too loose of a definition of family? What's your take on that?
Look, family business, there are so many family businesses that I've worked with that, the general manager's been there for 20, 30, 40 years, and gets a gold watch. And, you're part of the family. And he would sit down with the family, the business owning family, for dinners and come over in the evenings and socialize. That kind of family. So you have the core family of the ownership, but that becomes a wider family within the business, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Those individuals think they're family members. Unfortunately, when times get really tough, and there have been recessions and depression, what happens is the family, the bloodline gets close, or it gets fragmented completely.
Yeah, one or the other, huh?
But what you're talking about is family by choice, not family by bloodline. And, the amount of time we spend in our working life, we spend more time with our working cohort and our business people than we do with our own children, because the time with our children is early phase. By the time they're 20, they're out of home, sort of thing, and they're living their own lives. And so that narrow first 20 years we have with them is really short. If they stay in the business, then we can actually have them as co-workers. But then we start getting these questions of how does it all work together, and how do they become individuals within the family? Because, nuclear family is a family too. And when a mother and a father have 3 kids, and they all get married, you've got 4 nuclear families, not just one. And they have to operate as such. So those in-laws that come in, they're going to bring changes of culture to that family. So there's always more questions to ask, how did
That's
this
right.
happen? And why did that happen? And is there a bottom line to all of this? What do you really want as the outcome? If everybody can give their truth, that's a big word, truth.
It is.
If everybody can speak their truth in a family, that's a pretty amazing situation. You're winning all the time if you can speak your truth and
You
be
make me
honest.
think that your focus is always on fostering conversations or modeling respect. Is that true?
I believe so.
That's my sense of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a second ago about Zoom and its possibilities to broaden the conversation so more people might participate and such. But we haven't talked at all about other new technologies that some are terrified by. Artificial intelligence comes to mind. Others. Are you embracing some of those newer technologies or are you?
I'm trying to. I'm trying to. I've had a couple of little software packages that I've picked up that are AI that I've been playing with. Uh, it's a challenge. It's not that I don't want to try it, but there is just so much out there, and I don't. I was talking to one of my sons about what do I get, where do I go
Mm,
to look for. So what's the most effective for me is not necessarily having an executive assistant, but it's for me where I see my value is having real conversations with real people. So
mhm.
it's precipitating those conversations. How do I have those conversations? Setting up meetings. Well, I can use AI to do that, or I can have an EA do that. I've done interviews before and I've used AI to capture those interviews and document them and then put them into articles and all of those sorts of things. But I haven't made a robot to replace me yet. And I'm not sure I'd really want to, actually.
I was just thinking about
I
how
threw you there.
enjoyable John.ai would be.
Yeah,
John
I just
Broons.
threw you. Look at that.
I've seen some of those avatars and a little creeped out by them. But yours, I think, would be well received and appreciated by many folks.
Oh, I think I could replicate Father Christmas. Somebody told me,
Yeah, you could. So, what else? Anything you want to share? Or any questions you have for me?
Yeah. Do you want to go through the same thing? Is this the
No,
no? I mean, you've written
you're the
some you've written some interesting stuff. You've just written fiction. I mean, why fiction?
How can we limit our creativity? Why nonfiction? After writing 4 or 5 nonfiction books and academic stuff, it's dreadful stylistically. Creativity needs to be expressed in different forms, I think. So maybe fiction is one form, maybe other tangible projects are manifestations of creativity. I don't want to be limited.
I recognise that. I mean, your woodworking and your timber work and building and construction. You've got multifacets. So you've been
I think
entrepreneurial.
creativity defines us as a species.
Yeah.
When we create, we express.
So, do you have a picture of the next 3 to 5 years?
That was my journal topic this morning. I do write daily as a tactic to kind of like, open up whatever blocks I've got in my little head. And the short answer is no. One of the things that I'm aware of is I just became a grandfather, so I'm a different phase in life, I think. And our kids are of an age where we travel together, we go on trips together and hang together, and that's easy and it's fun. And I'm not as focused on broader families and needs and clients and communities because I'm not really inclined to join groups. But one of the mentors that I have is doing so. He's hosting events, and I'm beginning to wonder if that's something I need to spend more time either doing or joining. We'll see. How about
Well,
you? Have you got a vision for 3 to 5 years?
the picture is a little bit more of the same, actually. I am still loving my Vistage group.
Mm.
That gives me joy and it keeps me connected to real world in real time. And yes, it's only local, but it's a national and international business. So I do get to connect in a wider circle, which is great. And the consulting that I do, I've slowed down a little bit. So I'm giving myself more time to look after me, which I haven't done for many, many years. So I'm not working as I
Maybe you're
think
being selective,
I'm
walking the dog, spending time with your kids.
Yeah, well, the walking the dogs with my wife, it's time with her every evening. And the only time we don't do it is when she's interstate or we're away. So that's important time for me. And when we're away with the kids, I also have grandkids. They're a few years now, but I'm not that far in front of you, Doug. I think we worked that out. I reckon I've got somewhere between 10 and 20 years to have fun and
Mhm.
enjoy. And it's the participating of sharing time with my wife and my kids and my grandkids. That's the stuff that I'm enjoying. I've been very lucky. I have friends. I grew up in Melbourne, so I have a lot of friends in Melbourne. I don't see them very often, but I stay in touch. I have a number of good friends here in Perth. Uh, you can only see so many people, so you really have to get very careful about how many friends that you have. You've got to have really good relationships with them, that it doesn't matter the time that you don't see them.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was talking with my wife earlier about um, a big birthday that's looming for me. And it's sort of like, well, hang on, who do you want to have? Do you want to have a party? And if you're going to have a party in Perth, you're going to have one in Melbourne. And then it started getting to be, well, this is no, I don't want that sort of thing. So it's going to be a quiet dinner with just a few friends, but it'll probably be in two cities. And that's the kind of thing that I want to do. Stay close to those friends that this guy particularly that I'm talking about. I think I've known him for 65 years. We're in the first year of school together. It's pretty rare to, don't know really how rare it is, but it's not so common for me that, you still stay friends with kids and you still call them kids when you're 70. And
That's right.
kids you went through puberty with.
I think that's a tremendous example of us becoming more selective as we age with our energy and our love and who we choose to spend time with. I've enjoyed our conversations monthly, roughly, for some time now. I really haven't clocked how long it's been, but I'm sure it's over a year. It's striking to me that often when we have our one-to-ones, one of us will say something like, I don't really talk with others about this. I like that.
Yeah, well, we have a trust. We have a mutual bond, and it's been a very easy conversation, easy relationship. We don't have a lot of stuff that people do come across when you become friends and your neighbors, or you're in the same city, or you work in the same building. We don't have history other than what you and I have told each other.
Mhm. I've made up mine, by the way. It's all fiction.
I guess, and everything I've read about you isn't true.
There you go. But virtual connections are sometimes like that, aren't they? They're edited or selective in a similar way to,
Well, they're clearer. At least, when you're always speaking the truth, it becomes very easy to have a conversation because you're not trying to cover anything up,
there's a gem.
right? And there's a great old paradigm, always be yourself because everyone else is taken.